Chapter 1. The Meeting of Betrayal. The conference room of Vaughn Systems gleamed with corporate perfection, glass walls, polished oak table, and a faint hum from the air conditioner that couldn't cool the tension thickening in the air. Evan Rivers sat at the far end, a few chairs down from the head where Gregory Vaughn, the CEO, and his father-in-law, was quietly flipping through a report. The rest of the executives were seated in stiff silence, exchanging uneasy glances. Evan could feel in his gut something was wrong. He'd been through hundreds of meetings in this room, but this one felt different, colder. "Let's begin," Gregory said finally, his voice as sharp as glass. "We'll make this quick." Evan straightened his tie, tried to ignore the subtle way the HR head, Monica, avoided his eyes. His palms were slightly damp. He'd stayed late last night running network diagnostics, patching yet another breach before it could become a headline. He'd thought today was his quarterly performance review, maybe even a presentation of his new security framework proposal. But as Gregory turned a page and sighed audibly, a different kind of silence filled the room, the kind that precedes execution. "Mr. Rivers," Gregory began, looking up with that polished corporate smile that never reached his eyes. "We've reviewed your recent performance metrics, and, unfortunately, it's not up to standard." The words hung there, absurd like a bad joke told in the middle of a funeral. Evan blinked. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Gregory leaned back in his chair. "You've been with Vaughn Systems for, 3 years now?" 4.5. Evan corrected automatically. Gregory nodded dismissively. "Right, 4.5. And while we appreciate your contributions, it's become clear that your division hasn't met expectations. Security vulnerabilities continue to arise. Clients are dissatisfied. We can't afford that." Across the table, someone cleared their throat. Evan recognized the voice, Blake, the newly promoted IT director. Blake was the one who'd botched last month's rollout that Evan had spent nights fixing in secret. Evan's jaw tightened. "Sir," he began carefully, "the vulnerabilities you're referring to were caused by integration failures from Blake's team?" "Not." Gregory raised a hand. "Let's not assign blame." His tone was final, managerial. "The point is, we need change. And after careful consideration, the board and I have decided to let you go. Effective immediately." The words struck like ice water. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Evan's pulse thudded in his ears. The room blurred slightly, Monica's nervous tapping, the flickering projector light, the metallic click of a pen. He tried to process it. "Let you go. Effective immediately. After all the late nights. After covering for their failures. After writing the very code that kept this company from being hacked into oblivion." He looked at Gregory, trying to find some trace of human decency behind that corporate mask. "May I ask why this decision wasn't discussed with me privately first?" Gregory gave a dry laugh. "Evan, you're part of this company, not family in this context. This is business. Don't make it personal." That line, "not family," landed harder than the firing itself. From the corner of his eye, Evan caught Alyssa standing near the glass wall, her arms crossed. She had shown up halfway through the meeting, dressed impeccably, as always. His wife, the CEO's daughter. The woman who once claimed she fell in love with him because he was different from her father. She didn't speak, didn't even look at him. Evan swallowed hard. "Not personal," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "Understood." Gregory clasped his hands. "HR will finalize your termination paperwork by noon. You'll receive 2 months severance and an NDA for confidentiality. We wish you all the best." He said it like a line rehearsed 1,000 times. A cold laugh escaped Evan before he could stop it. 2 months severance," he echoed, shaking his head. "After building the system that's keeping this company standing." "Evan," Monica murmured gently, eyes pleading with him to stop. But Evan didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply stared at Gregory, the man who'd smiled at him at his wedding, who'd shaken his hand and called him son, and realized this wasn't just corporate politics. It was personal. This had been planned. He turned to Alyssa. "You knew." Her lips tightened. She avoided his eyes, adjusting the strap of her designer handbag. "Dad told me last night," she said finally. "It's for the best." Maybe you'll find something more suited to your skills. Something in her tone, that smug pity, snapped something inside him. He rose slowly, sliding his chair back with a soft scrape. Right, he said. Something more suited. Gregory's voice followed him as he gathered his folder. Evan, let's keep this professional. There's no need for theatrics. Evan paused by the door and looked back at the man. The room full of fake sympathy, the silent colleagues who owed him their jobs, the wife who wouldn't even meet his eyes. I'm not being theatrical, he said quietly. I'm just leaving with what I walked in with, my dignity. The words echoed faintly as he stepped out, closing the glass door behind him. Outside, the hallway was bright with morning light streaming through the windows. He walked past rows of cubicles, people pretending to work, whispering as he passed. A few tried to offer awkward smiles of consolation, but he didn't slow down. In the elevator, he finally allowed himself to breathe. The polished metal doors reflected a tired man in a suit, his tie slightly loosened, eyes dark but steady. When the doors slid open on the ground floor, the receptionist, Maya, one of the few who always greeted him kindly, looked up, startled. Mr. Rivers? Everything okay? He managed a faint smile. Perfectly fine, Maya. Are you leaving early? She asked hesitantly. He nodded. You could say that. Outside, the city buzzed with late morning noise, cars honking, phones ringing, the life of people who didn't know that a man's world had just been quietly dismantled behind glass walls. He stood there for a long moment, letting the cool wind brush against his face. His phone buzzed with new emails, HR notifications, unread messages from people pretending to care. He turned it off. As he crossed the street, he didn't look back at the tall silver building that had once felt like his second home. He didn't need to. He could already feel the cold satisfaction in Gregory's smirk, Alyssa's indifferent gaze. But deep inside, beneath the calm surface, something shifted, a silent awakening. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sorrow. It was something colder, steadier, the quiet understanding that this was not the end. He walked away, each step deliberate, the echo of his shoes fading into the city noise. He had lost everything in that room, yet somehow he felt lighter. He didn't know it yet, but what began in betrayal would soon end in revelation. But for now, Evan Rivers simply walked out, calm, silent, and changed forever. Chapter 2. The Wife's Final Blow. The front gate of the Vaughn estate loomed ahead, tall and cold, like everything else in Evan's life that morning. The security guard gave him a sympathetic nod as he swiped his key card one last time. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was still allowed in the mansion, though he no longer belonged anywhere inside it. As he pushed open the heavy oak doors, the faint scent of lavender and expensive perfume filled the marble foyer. The house looked like a page out of a magazine, gleaming floors, designer furniture, not a thing out of place. It was beautiful, soulless, and silent. Alyssa, he called softly, setting his briefcase down by the entryway. His voice echoed back, unanswered at first. He loosened his tie and ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion sinking deep into his bones. She appeared a moment later, descending the staircase in her silk robe, coffee mug in hand, looking more like someone heading to a brunch shoot than greeting her husband who'd just been fired by her father. "Oh, you're home early," she said flatly, not even pretending to be surprised. Evan studied her face, perfectly composed, expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Your father made sure of that." Alyssa set her mug down on the glass table, her heels clicking against the marble as she walked closer. "Well," she began, her tone feather-light but edged with ice. "Dad warned you this might happen. He said your performance reviews weren't looking great." Evan gave a humorless chuckle. "Performance issues," he repeated. That's the word he used in front of the whole board. Guess that line runs in the family. Alyssa crossed her arms. "Don't start, Evan. You know this is just business. You can't expect Dad to keep you around just because you married me." He stared at her, disbelief flooding his chest. "You really think this was about business? You think I didn't see how neatly that meeting was arranged? HR, Blake, everyone. You knew." For the first time, her composure faltered, a brief flicker of guilt, quickly buried under disdain. It wasn't my decision, she snapped. But honestly, you've been stagnant lately. Always working late, always stressed. It's like you lost your drive. Lost my drive? Evans said, his voice sharpening. I carried that company's systems for years. While your father was busy making speeches and your board was signing checks, I was the one keeping their empire from burning down. Please, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. You act like you're some kind of hero. You were just an IT manager, Evan. A replaceable one. The words hit harder than she probably intended. Replaceable, he repeated softly, nodding. Right. Alyssa walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a printed sheet of paper. She turned, holding it up as though she were presenting a contract. Since we're talking about what's next, she said, her tone suddenly brisk, I thought I'd help you get started. Evan frowned. What's that? She placed it on the table, a neatly printed list of homeless shelters and temporary housing programs in the city. You know, she said casually, in case you can't find another job right away. I figured it's better than sleeping in your car. For a second, Evan didn't speak. He just stared at the paper, his heartbeat slowing to a heavy, echoing thud. He finally looked up. You're serious. Alyssa shrugged. I'm not running a charity, Evan. I married a man who could match my lifestyle, not drag it down. You're jobless, and your severance won't last. So yes, I think it's better we go our separate ways. He took a step closer, voice calm, but trembling slightly. After everything I've done, after all the nights I stayed up fixing your father's disasters, you don't even hesitate. Don't guilt-trip me, she snapped. You're not the only one who lost something. Do you know how embarrassing this is for me? My husband fired by my father. People are already whispering. Evan exhaled slowly. That's what matters to you. What people whisper. Alyssa looked away, fiddling with her diamond bracelet. You'll thank me someday, she said finally. You're too soft for that world. Maybe you'll find something smaller, simpler, something that suits you. He almost laughed. You mean something beneath you. Don't twist my words, she said defensively. I just can't, she hesitated, then finished with cutting finality. I can't be with a failure. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Evan's eyes drifted toward the framed wedding photo on the mantel, the two of them smiling under golden lights, her father shaking his hand. It looked like a moment from another lifetime. Failure, he whispered, as if testing how it sounded. Funny thing, Alyssa, failure isn't losing everything. It's losing yourself. And I think you already have. Her jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. He gave a slow nod, emotion draining from his voice. You know what's sad? I'm not even angry. Just disappointed. You used to be kind. You used to believe in people. I guess that woman's gone now. Alyssa crossed her arms again, her mask of confidence sliding neatly back into place. Spare me the sentimental lecture, Evan. You're not exactly innocent. You could have tried harder. Fought for your position. For us. I did fight, he said quietly. Just not the kind of fight you understand. She tilted her head, still pretending to be noble. A faint smirk tugged at her lips. Keep acting calm all you want. You'll break soon. You'll come crawling back. Everyone does, eventually. Evan stood there for a long moment, her words hanging in the air like poison. Then, without another sound, he walked past her, heading toward their bedroom. What are you doing? She demanded. Exactly what you asked, he said. Leaving. In the bedroom, he pulled an old duffel bag from the closet and began folding clothes into it methodically. The mundane rhythm, fold, zip, breathe, steadied him. He could hear Alyssa pacing in the hallway, muttering under her breath about timing and embarrassment. He picked up the watch she'd gifted him on their first anniversary, engraved with the words, "Forever yours," and placed it on the dresser. He didn't need it anymore. When he stepped back into the hall, Alyssa was leaning against the doorway, arms folded. You're really doing this? He nodded once. Yes. She stared at him, perhaps expecting an outburst, a plea, something to prove she still had control. But Evan's silence unnerved her more than any argument ever could. Don't think walking out makes you noble, she said finally. It just makes you pathetic. He stopped at the doorway and looked at her one last time, really looked at her. The perfect makeup, the cold eyes, the small tremor in her fingers she was trying to hide. "I loved you once," he said softly. "That's all I'll say." Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Evan opened the door. Outside, the sky had turned gray. The wind carried the first drops of rain, cool, quiet, cleansing. He stepped out without an umbrella, without hesitation. The door closed behind him with a soft click. As he walked down the stone path, rain began to fall harder, soaking his shirt, plastering his hair to his forehead. But he didn't care. Each step felt lighter, freer, like he was leaving more than just a house behind. He didn't look back. Inside, Alyssa watched through the window, arms still crossed, expression unreadable. Outside, Evan Rivers kept walking, his silence heavier than any words he could ever say. Chapter 3: Beneath the Surface. The city was a blur of neon lights and rain-soaked streets when Evan stepped off the bus. His duffel bag felt heavier than it should have, not from weight, but from the silence that followed him everywhere since he walked out of that mansion. He found a small apartment on the edge of the city, tucked between a laundromat and a 24-hour diner. It wasn't much: one bedroom, a creaky wooden floor, and a view of a flickering streetlight. But when he turned the key and stepped inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. The air smelled faintly of old paint and dust. The walls were bare, the radiator groaned like an old man, and the ceiling fan turned lazily, but the quiet was absolute. No corporate buzz, no phone calls, no condescending voices telling him who to be. Just him. He dropped his bag on the worn-out couch and sat for a long moment, head in his hands. The events of the past 24 hours pressed down on him. The boardroom, Alyssa's cold voice, Gregory's smirk. His whole life had been built on the illusion of loyalty, and in one day, it shattered. He let out a slow breath and looked around. "Well," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Welcome home." After a long shower, the kind where water runs until it turns cold and you don't care, he changed into a clean t-shirt and jeans. He ordered takeout from the diner next door and ate it standing by the window, watching headlights slice through the drizzle below. When the clock hit midnight, he walked over to the small desk by the wall and unzipped his laptop bag. The familiar click of the latch echoed softly through the room. He placed the black machine on the table, plugged it in, and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, dark blue, then black, then a series of encrypted prompts that looked like gibberish to anyone else. But to him, it was poetry. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before typing a sequence of commands only he knew by heart. Lines of code streamed down the screen. Then a single logo appeared, glowing softly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Nexaware Technologies. Evan stared at it for a long moment, his reflection faint in the glass. A mixture of pride and pain twisted in his chest. Nexaware, his creation, his vision. Years ago, before Gregory Vaughn ever knew his name, Nexaware had been a small project built in his apartment, a cybersecurity prototype designed to outsmart even the most advanced hacking algorithms. He poured everything into it: nights, savings, passion. Then Vaughn Systems had come calling. Gregory had wanted to buy the technology outright, but Evan had refused to sell full rights. Instead, he'd offered a 5-year renewable license, retaining ownership of the core framework. At the time, it had felt like a smart business move. Now it felt prophetic. He navigated through layers of encryption until a dashboard appeared, listing every company still using Nexaware's security infrastructure. Vaughn Systems was right at the top, license expiring in 12 days. Evan leaned back in his chair, the faint hum of the computer filling the silence. He remembered that meeting vividly, Gregory shaking his hand, saying, "You'll go far with me, son." Alyssa smiling beside him, promising to support his dreams. He believed them. He trusted them. And they'd built their empire on his work, the same empire that now saw him as replaceable. He opened a folder labeled Private Holdings. Inside, digital documents glimmered with significance. Proof of his 12% silent ownership in Vaughn Systems' tech division. Patent filings in his name. Secure backdoor access keys to the Nexaware system architecture. Every file was meticulously organized, encrypted, and stored under multiple aliases. Gregory had no idea how deep Evan's roots ran in the company's foundation. He smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "You took everything from me," he whispered, "except the one thing you never understood: control." His phone buzzed on the table, breaking the stillness. A new message, unknown number. "Heard what happened. You okay?" Evan hesitated, then typed back, "I'm fine, just clearing my head." A moment later, another text appeared. "It's Clara. If you need anything, call me. They'll regret this." He looked at the name, warmth flickering briefly through the cold. Clara Jensen, his old colleague, one of the few people who saw through the office politics. She'd always said Gregory's empire was built on borrowed time. Maybe she'd been right. He didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, he turned back to the screen. The NextAware interface glowed softly, displaying its heartbeat-like pulse. Evan traced a finger over the screen, lost in thought. He thought about the day he'd first drawn the logo, two interlocking rings forming an infinite loop. It was supposed to represent security without limits. Ironically, it had also become the very chain his in-laws had used to keep him tied down. Not anymore. He began typing quick, decisive keystrokes. A small command window opened. System audit. Active licenses, modify access. He wasn't going to shut anything down, not yet. He wasn't after chaos or destruction. That wasn't his style. But he wanted visibility. He wanted to know exactly what they were doing with his technology and how far they'd overstepped. As the logs loaded, he saw lines of unauthorized code, patches inserted by Blake's team, corrupting parts of the system he designed. They had no idea what they were doing. No idea how fragile the balance was. He rubbed his temple, leaning back. "They built an empire on borrowed bricks," he murmured. On the floor beside him, the rain tapped against the window, steady and rhythmic. He stood up, poured himself a cup of cheap coffee from the vending machine in the hallway, and sat back down, eyes steady now. He wasn't angry anymore. Not the wild kind of anger that burned fast and vanished. This was something colder, measured, deliberate. He wasn't after petty revenge. He wasn't going to hack them or sabotage their systems overnight. That would be too easy, too obvious. No, Evan Rivers wanted justice. Real, undeniable justice, the kind that came quietly, wrapped in truth and timing. He looked at the flickering NextAware logo again, the symbol of everything they had underestimated. "Let's see what happens," he whispered, a faint, almost invisible smile tugging at his lips. The cursor blinked patiently on the dark screen. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, low and promising. In that dim apartment, with only the glow of his laptop for company, Evan felt something stirred deep inside him. Not bitterness, not grief, but purpose. He closed a few windows, encrypted his files again, and leaned back in his chair, the glow of NextAware reflecting faintly in his eyes. They thought they'd destroyed him. They had no idea they'd just woken him up. And as the night deepened, the quiet hum of the computer was the only sound left. A heartbeat beneath the surface, waiting. Evan folded his arms, took one last sip of coffee, and whispered into the still air, "This isn't revenge, Gregory. It's balance." Then he shut the laptop. Calmly, Evan began preparing. He wasn't after petty revenge. He was after justice. Chapter 4, Quiet Movements. The next morning, the gray light of dawn slipped through the blinds of Evan's small apartment. He sat at his desk, nursing a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. His laptop screen glowed faintly against the dim walls, lines of code flickering like the pulse of a machine coming alive. He hadn't slept, not because of grief that had burned away days ago, but because his mind was clear, focused. He knew exactly what he had to do. He opened his encrypted messenger and typed a name he hadn't contacted in months. Clara Jensen. "Evan, need your eyes on a system audit. NextAware infrastructure. Discretion required." "Clara." "Evan, holy hell, you're alive. I heard rumors about Vaughn firing you. You okay?" "Evan, I'm fine. Better, actually. Are you in?" "Clara, always. Send me the access." He couldn't help but smile faintly. Clara had always been the sharpest mind in the IT division, competent, grounded, and loyal to truth rather than politics. She'd been the only one to warn him years ago that Gregory Vaughn didn't play fair. Within half an hour, Clara was online, her profile popping up on his system dashboard. Still using the same encryption key, she teased through the headset, her voice familiar, comforting. I built it, Evan replied dryly. Why change perfection? She chuckled, spoken like a true narcissist. All right, let's see what your old company's been up to. Their screens synced, and a flurry of data scrolled between them. Access logs, license requests, patch updates, and maintenance records. Nexaware's monitoring system was clean and elegant, but the deeper they dug, the more Clara's tone shifted from amused to disturbed. Evan, she said after several minutes, this isn't just neglect. Someone's been tampering with the core framework. I figured, he said quietly. They've been patching without authorization, trying to hide back-end vulnerabilities. Who would be dumb enough to mess with your code? She muttered. Blake, Evan said, the name bitter on his tongue. He took my job after Gregory fired me, and he's been trying to improve a system he doesn't even understand. Clara groaned. That man couldn't debug his own password. They spent hours combing through the damage. Entire segments of the Nexaware core overwritten, security protocols ignored, firewalls dismantled and hastily reassembled. It was chaos disguised as progress. This is a disaster waiting to happen, Clara said finally. Evan leaned back, eyes half-lidded, thinking. Then let it happen. There was a pause. You mean, I'm not touching anything, he said calmly. Not yet. The license runs out soon. Once it does, their systems will revert to unlicensed mode automatically. They'll think it's a glitch. By the time they realize what's happening, the infrastructure will start collapsing on its own. Clara whistled softly. That's cold, but poetic. Evan's lips twitched into the faintest smile. I'm not doing this out of spite, Clara. They took what wasn't theirs. All I'm doing is removing the safety net they didn't deserve. Clara nodded slowly. Fair enough. But just know, when Gregory Vaughn realizes what's happening, he's going to come for blood. He could try, Evan murmured, but he'll be swinging at shadows. By mid-afternoon, news from the corporate world began trickling in through Clara's feeds. Vaughn Systems had launched a new client management update, Blake's pet project, and within an hour, their servers started lagging. By evening, a dozen internal users were locked out entirely. Evan watched the data unfold from his screen. Packet loss, corrupted nodes, authentication failures. Each error was like a domino toppling, subtle yet inevitable. His phone buzzed, a social media notification. Out of habit, he glanced at it. Alyssa Vaughn had posted a photo on her profile, a glamorous shot at a rooftop party, glass of champagne in hand. The caption read, Fresh starts and brighter horizons sparkles freedom new beginnings. He stared at it for a moment, then locked the phone and set it face down on the desk. He wasn't angry. He just saw her clearly now. Your ex-wife's living her best life, Clara muttered, having seen the same post. You okay? Evan shrugged. She's doing what she does best, performing. And Gregory? Evan clicked over to a business news article. There he was, Gregory Vaughn, in an interview video clip, smugly proclaiming, we've streamlined operations by letting go of unnecessary weight. The company's future is brighter than ever. Dead weight? Evan murmured under his breath. That's what he called me. Clara leaned closer to her screen. Funny thing about dead weight. Sometimes it's the only thing holding the ship steady. That night, the storm outside rolled in heavy, lightning flashing faintly over the city skyline. Inside his apartment, the room glowed with the dim light of 2 monitors. Evan's fingers moved quickly but precisely. No hacking, no intrusion, just observation. Each click revealed another crack forming in Vaughn Systems infrastructure. Servers failing authentication. Encrypted client data timing out. Payment systems cycling endlessly. They've got no idea what's happening, Clara said over the line, astonished. They'll assume it's a system bug, Evan replied. Then they'll call Blake. He'll patch something wrong, and that'll make it worse. He took a slow sip of his coffee, unbothered, watching the chaos unfold in real time. Evan, Clara said softly after a while, I know you said this isn't revenge, but watching you work like this, I can't tell if I'm impressed or terrified. He chuckled under his breath. Maybe a bit of both. Outside, thunder rolled again, closer this time. Rain pattered against the window in uneven rhythms. He minimized his console and pulled up a live status dashboard, the Vaughn network blinking red in multiple sectors. Within hours, reports were flooding internal forums. Server outage affecting all clients. Unauthorized file deletion detected. Financial records missing from database. Clara whistled. You're a ghost, Evan. No fingerprints. No traces. That's the point, he replied. You can't track a system that's obeying its own expiry code. The license is doing the work for me. Still, she said, lowering her voice, what happens when they figure out it's the NextAware core? Evan leaned back, watching the chaos unfold like a conductor observing an orchestra. They'll have no one to blame but themselves. They built their empire on my foundation and thought they could cut me out. They forgot foundations crack when they're tampered with. Claire smiled faintly. And the man who built it always knows where to press. He didn't respond, but his eyes stayed fixed on the screen, the flickering lights reflecting in them like distant stars. In the corner of his monitor, a new email notification appeared. From Internal Admin, Vaughn Systems, subject, urgent, license authentication failure. Please contact NextAware support. Evan stared at it for a moment, then quietly closed the message. Let them sweat, he said softly. Clara laughed. You're enjoying this. No, he said, shaking his head, just appreciating the symmetry. By midnight, the system failures multiplied. Vaughn Systems client servers were collapsing one by one. Panic was spreading through the corporate network like wildfire. Blake's emergency patch only accelerated the failure, looping their backup systems into the same corrupted cycle. Evan watched from his apartment, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the laptop. He didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't curse. Every keystroke he made was deliberate, not to destroy, but to observe, to let justice unfold naturally. As the rain pounded harder outside, he sat back, arms folded, calm and expressionless. This wasn't chaos. This was consequence. And in the quiet hum of that small apartment, with Clara silently watching from her own screen miles away, Evan Rivers worked, silent, efficient, mercilessly professional. Every click was calculated. Every consequence deserved. Chapter 5, The Collapse. The storm that had been gathering over Vaughn Systems finally broke. It began with an email, short, panicked, and poorly written. Subject, urgent, system-wide license failure from IT admin, all servers down. Client portals locked. Main database inaccessible. Authentication key invalid. Please advise immediately. Gregory Vaughn read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. He was sitting in his glass-walled office, the same one where he'd humiliated Evan weeks earlier. Now, the calm veneer he wore like armor began to fracture. His assistant, trembling, stood by the door holding a stack of reports. Sir, she said nervously, the Asia-Pacific servers are offline. Europe's next. Clients are threatening to pull out. Gregory slammed his fist onto the desk. Find Blake. Now. Within minutes, Blake, the new IT director, who had taken Evan's position, rushed in, sweat already darkening his collar. Mr. Vaughn, I'm on it, but what? Gregory barked. The core system's license has expired. The NextAware authentication key isn't validating. Gregory stared at him. Then renew it, damn it. I can't, Blake stammered. It's locked under the founder's encryption. We only had temporary enterprise rights. It's asking for root access from the original creator. Gregory's face drained of color. The original creator? You mean Evan Rivers? The name hit the room like a thunderclap. By noon, Vaughn Systems was in total disarray. Screens flickered across every floor, passwords failed, encrypted documents vanished. The company's own cybersecurity software, the crown jewel of their empire, refused to recognize its owners. In the boardroom, executives argued over each other, voices rising in panic. We need to contact NextAware immediately. The number's disconnected. Who the hell runs NextAware now? Didn't we buy full rights? No. Another voice admitted reluctantly. We only leased the framework. It was due for renewal last week. The room fell silent. Then Gregory's phone began to ring. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment miles away, Evan Rivers sat at his desk, quietly typing. His workspace was clean, ordered a cup of coffee, a notepad of sketches, and 2 monitors filled with code and business plans. The world outside was chaos. But here, everything made sense. His phone, placed face down beside the keyboard, began to vibrate. Once, twice, again. He didn't move. He was drafting a press statement for Nexaware Technologies, a relaunch under his full ownership. The new company would be smaller, smarter, ethical. It would rebuild from the ashes of what Gregory's greed had tried to steal. The phone buzzed again. He didn't even look at it. Across town, Alyssa Vaughn was in the middle of a luxury spa appointment when her card got declined. She frowned, assuming it was a glitch. She tried another. Declined. She switched apps, checking her accounts, every single one frozen. "What the hell?" she muttered. "There must be some mistake." The spa receptionist gave an apologetic smile. "Ma'am, your payment isn't going through. Do you have another method?" Alyssa's cheeks flushed red. "My father will handle it," she snapped, gathering her purse. But as she scrolled through her notifications, panic clawed at her chest. Her financial accounts were all linked through Vaughn Systems' encrypted service, the same system that was now dead. Even her trust fund access was offline. "Dad," she hissed over the phone, "what's happening? My cards are frozen." Her father's voice came back strained, furious. "Not now, Alyssa. Everything's down. Call Evan." He stopped mid-sentence. A long silence. Then she whispered, "You can't be serious." That evening, Evan's apartment was dim except for the faint glow of his screens. Clara's voice came through the headset. "You seeing the headlines?" He clicked open the news feed. Breaking. Vaughn Systems faces major cybersecurity meltdown. CEO silent as clients lose access worldwide. He leaned back, arms crossed. It was bound to happen. "They're calling it the Vaughn blackout," Clara said. "Investors are pulling millions." Their stock dropped 30% in an hour. Evan took a slow sip of coffee. "Poetic. You think they know it's you?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "They'll figure out soon enough." As if on cue, his phone began to buzz again, insistent, unending. He flipped it over. Gregory Vaughn, then Alyssa, then Blake. One after another. Again and again. He set the phone back down, face first, and resumed typing. In the Vaughn Systems crisis room, the scene was chaos. Technicians scrambled from terminal to terminal, shouting error codes and failed commands. "Sir, all backup servers are rejecting authentication. The Nexaware key can't be bypassed. Client data is vanishing." Gregory's voice was hoarse from shouting. "Get Evan Rivers on the line." "He's not picking up," Blake croaked. "We've called him 30 times. "Then call again." They did. 50, 80, 100. Each time, the same result, silence. By evening, Gregory had called so many times that his own phone battery was dying. His assistant handed him a charger with trembling hands. "Sir, it's been over 100 attempts. I don't care," he roared. "He'll pick up eventually." But Evan didn't. He didn't even look. Alyssa sat alone in her penthouse, lights dimmed, staring at her reflection in the window. Her phone was on the table, buzzing endlessly. Her father, then her mother, then finally, Evan. She stared at his name on the screen, her pulse quickening. For a brief moment, she hoped he would answer. Maybe he'd still care. Maybe he'd still know. The call didn't connect. He'd blocked her. The screen dimmed. Her reflection stared back, flawless makeup, perfect hair, but behind the facade, fear began to seep in. "Evan," she whispered, voice trembling. "What did you do?" In the quiet of his apartment, Evan watched the storm from his window. The rain hit the glass rhythmically, steady, almost soothing. On the desk beside him, his phone buzzed again. He didn't touch it. 164 missed calls. He let it vibrate until the sound faded into the hum of the night. Instead, he turned back to his work. On the screen, the Nexaware logo pulsed to life, sleek, silver, modern. Beneath it, he typed the tagline, "Integrity restored." He paused for a moment, letting the words settle. Then, with a quiet exhale, he hit save. The phone buzzed once more, Gregory Vaughn's name flashing desperately. Evan reached over, flipped it face down again, and whispered to himself, almost peacefully, "You took everything from me. Now you get to feel what nothing feels like." The phone fell silent. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, soft and slow, not angry but final. And in that small apartment, Evan Rivers kept working, calm, steady, untouchable, while the empire that mocked him finally collapsed under its own arrogance. He didn't need to say a word. His silence said everything. Chapter 6, The Return. The Vaughn Systems headquarters looked different now, not in structure, but in spirit. The once bustling glass tower that had radiated arrogance and confidence now felt heavy with tension. Employees whispered in corridors, investors hovered in the lobby demanding answers, and the marble floors echoed with hurried, anxious footsteps. A week had passed since the company's catastrophic meltdown, a week of sleepless nights, system lockouts, and hemorrhaging clients. The empire that Gregory Vaughn had built on pride and deceit was cracking at the foundation. At 9 a.m., the board of directors gathered in the 11th floor conference room. The long oak table stretched beneath cold fluorescent lights. Folders, tablets, and trembling coffee cups covered its surface. Gregory sat at the head, looking older than he had in years. Deep shadows hung under his eyes, and his tie was crooked, a rare sign of his unraveling composure. "Let's begin," he said sharply, though his voice lacked its usual authority. The CFO cleared her throat. "Sir, our losses have surpassed $40 million in client contracts. The Nexaware framework is still down, and we can't access any of our secure data. Investors are threatening to sue." Gregory's hand slammed the table. "Enough. We'll find a workaround. There has to be a way to bypass the system." Mr. Vaughn, another director, spoke carefully. "The system doesn't respond to administrative overrides. The encryption is owner-locked. The only person who can access or renew it—" "Don't you dare say his name," Gregory snapped. The door suddenly opened. Every head turned, and there he was, Evan Rivers. He stood in the doorway wearing a dark suit, sharp, tailored, and nothing like the weary man they had discarded weeks ago. His presence filled the room, calm and controlled, but his eyes, steady, focused, carried the weight of quiet power. The silence was deafening. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning filled the room. Gregory's face went pale. "You have a lot of nerve walking in here, boy." Evan closed the door behind him. "Funny," he said mildly. "That's what you said when you fired me." Gasps rippled around the table. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. Some of them looked almost relieved to see him. Others simply stared, wary and speechless. Evan walked slowly toward the table, setting down a black briefcase. The sound of its clasps clicking open was almost ceremonial. He pulled out a folder, neat, precise, and laid it on the table. "I won't take much of your time," he said evenly. "I'm here to clarify ownership." Gregory scoffed. "Ownership? You're delusional. You were an employee, nothing more." Evan looked up, meeting his gaze without flinching. "An employee? Maybe once. But you should have read the fine print before you decided to play God with what wasn't yours." He slid several documents across the table. The board members leaned in. "These," Evan continued, "are the original licensing contract between Nexaware Technologies and Vaughn Systems. You purchased a 5-year temporary enterprise access, not ownership. The agreement clearly states that all framework rights, root keys, and operational controls remain under Nexaware's original creator." He tapped his own signature at the bottom of the page. "My signature. My code. My system." Gregory's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Evan reached into his briefcase again, producing another set of papers, notarized, stamped, and legal. "In addition, under Clause 4.2 of the partnership acquisition deal, I retained 12% ownership of all technological assets derived from Nexaware's framework. That includes every product Vaughn Systems has developed using my base code." The CFO exhaled sharply. 12% of everything? Evan nodded. "Every line of code, every server, every client integration." The room buzzed with murmurs. One of the directors, a stern woman with silver hair, adjusted her glasses and read the documents. "These are legitimate," she said quietly. He's telling the truth. Gregory rose to his feet, his voice cracking with fury. You think you can walk in here and claim my company with a few pieces of paper? Evan's tone didn't waver. It was never yours. You built your empire on something I created, and you treated me like dirt under your shoe. You fired me in front of everyone, called me a failure. You even used your daughter to finish the job. At the mention of Alyssa, the tension in the room thickened. Several board members exchanged uneasy looks. They'd heard rumors of her financial scandals, of credit cards being frozen and funds vanishing. Evan placed another folder on the table, flipping it open. Inside were bank statements, transfers, and internal records. And since we're clearing the air, he said quietly, these are the records of personal fund misuse and fraudulent transactions under Alyssa Vaughn's name. Payments made using corporate accounts, jewelry, trips, private memberships, all charged to the company under consulting expenses. The CFO's face drained of color. My God! Gregory lunged for the papers, but Evans stepped back calmly, letting him grab them. The older man scanned them with shaking hands, his face turning red, then pale again. You, Gregory began, voice trembling. You think you could destroy us like this? Evan's voice was calm, almost gentle. No, Gregory, you destroyed yourself. I just brought the truth into the light. The silver-haired board member turned to Gregory. Mr. Vaughn, this is catastrophic. Not only is he legally correct, your daughter's misuse of company funds could trigger an investigation. Our shareholders will demand accountability. Another voice added, we can't afford another scandal. The company's already hanging by a thread. Gregory's breathing grew heavy. You can't do this to me. I built this company. No, Evan said softly, meeting his eyes. You built it on me. The words struck like thunder. The room fell still. After a long, tense pause, the silver-haired board member straightened. Given the evidence presented and the company's current crisis, I motioned for Gregory Vaughn to be suspended as CEO, pending investigation. A murmur followed. Then another voice said, seconded. Gregory looked around wildly. You're all making a mistake. But the vote was already in motion. One by one, the hands rose. When the final count came, it was unanimous. Gregory slumped back into his chair, defeated, his eyes burning with disbelief and rage. Evan gathered his documents calmly, slipping them back into the briefcase. For a moment, no one moved. Then he turned to the board, his voice quiet but firm. You fired the wrong man. He closed the briefcase, straightened his jacket, and turned toward the door. No one dared stop him. As he walked past Gregory, the older man muttered through clenched teeth, You'll regret this, Rivers. Evan paused by the doorway and looked back, not with anger but pity. I already did once. Then he walked out, leaving behind stunned silence and the wreckage of everything Gregory Vaughn had ever built. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, soft, steady light spilling across the marble floor as the door clicked shut behind him. For the first time, Evan Rivers didn't just leave Vaughn Systems. He walked out on his own terms. Chapter 7, Consequences. The next morning, the city woke to a storm of a different kind. Not thunder or rain, but headlines. Across every major news outlet, one name dominated the screens and front pages. Vaughn Systems under investigation for fraud and financial misconduct. CEO suspended after cybersecurity collapse. Leaked records reveal Vaughn family's hidden scandals. Television anchors spoke in urgent tones. Reporters stood outside the towering Vaughn headquarters, and analysts dissected every aspect of the empire's downfall. What had once been hailed as a symbol of innovation was now being dragged through the mud of its own corruption. Inside those glittering glass walls, panic reigned. Employees whispered in corners, unsure if they'd have jobs by the end of the week. Clients flooded customer support lines, demanding their data back. The company's official social media accounts were bombarded with outrage, mockery, and disbelief. The stock, once soaring and stable, nosedived within hours. Numbers plummeted on screens, the green digits turning red like bleeding wounds. Gregory Vaughn, the once proud king of the tech world, was now reduced to a man under siege. In his office, the blinds were drawn. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Reporters, lawyers, board members. The air smelled faintly of stale coffee and panic. He sat hunched at his desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes bloodshot. A news anchor's voice echoed from the muted television. Sources confirm the Department of Federal Commerce and Cybersecurity Division have opened an inquiry into Vaughn Systems following the collapse of its digital infrastructure. Financial records point to potential misuse of company funds linked to CEO Gregory Vaughn's immediate family. Gregory clenched his fists until his knuckles went white. "Turn that off," he roared. His assistant jumped and fumbled for the remote. The room fell silent again, except for the phone's incessant buzzing. He picked it up finally, snapping, "What?" "Sir," came the voice of one of the company lawyers, cautious and trembling. "They've subpoenaed the financial records. They're looking into Alyssa's corporate expenses and your offshore accounts. You need to cooperate." Gregory's jaw locked. "Do you think I'm going to hand them everything they ask for?" "Sir," refusing could. He hung up mid-sentence. For a moment, Gregory sat there in the dark, staring at the reflection of himself on the black TV screen, the reflection of a man who had built an empire and then watched it collapse within days. And at the back of his mind, one name echoed like a curse. Evan Rivers. Across the city, in a quiet corner cafe that smelled of roasted beans and morning calm, Evan sat opposite Clara Jensen. The place was peaceful, a world apart from the chaos unraveling downtown. Soft jazz played through the speakers. The light filtered golden through wide windows, and a faint breeze drifted in every time the door opened. Evan stirred his coffee slowly, watching the swirls form gentle ripples. Across the table, Clara scrolled through her tablet, eyes wide. "They're everywhere," she said, half in disbelief. "Every news site, every channel, they're tearing Vaughn Systems apart. I think half their investors just pulled out before lunch." Evan smiled faintly. "I told you truth moves faster than greed." Clara chuckled, shaking her head. "You're enjoying this a little too much." He looked out the window, his expression serene. "Not really. I'm just done carrying the weight of their lies." A pause settled between them. "Still," Clara said softly, setting the tablet down, "it's poetic. You didn't have to lift a finger after that board meeting. They're imploding on their own." He nodded. "That's how corruption works. It eats itself when the mask falls off." Their food arrived, 2 plates of eggs, toast, and fruit, simple but comforting. Evan took a bite, savoring the quiet. For the first time in years, his morning felt peaceful. No tension, no anxiety, no noise except the clinking of cups and soft murmurs around them. On a nearby TV screen above the cafe counter, the news continued. The anchor's voice was crisp, detached. Following the shocking suspension of Gregory Vaughn, sources reveal that his daughter, Alyssa Vaughn, is now under investigation for embezzling company funds to support her luxury lifestyle. Public backlash has been swift, with social media flooded by criticism. The screen switched to footage of Alyssa, once glamorous and adored, now surrounded by reporters outside a luxury building. Makeup streaked, sunglasses barely hiding her panic. "Ms. Vaughn, is it true you use company money for personal expenses? Did you know your husband owned the Nexaware license? Do you have any comment about your father's suspension?" Alyssa pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouts. Someone threw a question that froze her mid-step. "Do you regret how you treated Evan Rivers?" She turned, momentarily speechless, eyes darting to the cameras. Then she rushed into her car, slamming the door shut. Back at the cafe, Clara glanced at Evan. "You seeing this?" He didn't even look up. Let her face her truth. "It's overdue." Back at Vaughn HQ, federal agents arrived quietly but firmly, men and women in dark suits flashing badges as they entered. Employees stopped and stared as they walked past, carrying sealed envelopes and court orders. The news spread across every department floor in seconds. "The feds are here." Gregory watched from his office window, his reflection shaking. He wanted to storm out, to yell, to fight, but there was no one left to intimidate. His power had evaporated with his credibility. He reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Evan's name. His finger hovered over the screen. For a fleeting second, pride faltered, replaced by something that looked almost like desperation. Then he threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Meanwhile, Evan sat back in his chair, sipping his coffee slowly as the cafe filled with the gentle hum of the morning crowd. Clara smiled faintly at the irony. You know, she said, most people would call what happened revenge. Evan looked thoughtful. Revenge is about pain. What I wanted was balance. She tilted her head. You really don't hate them? No, he said after a moment. Hate means they still control you. I stopped letting them the day I walked out of that house. Clara smiled softly. You're something else, Evan. He chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned that peace is louder than shouting. The waitress passed by with a refill. Evan thanked her politely, then reached for his tablet, opening Nexaware's relaunch proposal. The screen glowed faintly with the company's new slogan at the top. Integrity restored. He looked at it for a long moment, the corners of his lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. The world outside could rage all it wanted, investigations, scandals, downfall, but here in this quiet cafe, the storm had already passed. He and Clara clinked their coffee mugs lightly, a quiet toast to survival, to truth, to starting over. Across the city, camera flashes still followed Alyssa as she stepped into the courthouse. Gregory's lawyers scrambled to shield him from the press. Vaughn Systems' logo was being taken down from its flagship tower. But Evan Rivers didn't watch any of it. He didn't need to, because sometimes the truest justice wasn't delivered in a courtroom or a confrontation. It unfolded naturally, like a slow sunrise after a long night. And as he sat there with Clara, the faint hum of the cafe surrounding him, he realized something profound. He felt no hatred, no anger, only closure. Outside, the morning light broke fully through the clouds, warm, forgiving, and new. Chapter 8, The Rebuild. The city skyline glimmered under the soft gold of a new morning, reflecting off glass towers like a promise of renewal. For the first time in months, Evan Rivers stood on a rooftop not as an employee, not as a man discarded by arrogance, but as the founder of something reborn. The sign in front of the renovated office read, in sleek silver letters, Nexaware Technologies. This time, the name didn't belong to someone else's portfolio. It was his, completely. He pushed open the glass doors, stepping into the bright, open floor where a handful of young engineers were unpacking boxes, wiring equipment, and laughing between tasks. It wasn't the cold, corporate silence of Vaughn Systems. It was human, alive, imperfect in all the right ways. A banner stretched across the main hall read, Integrity first always. Evan paused beneath it, tracing the words with his eyes. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a vow. Behind him, a familiar voice called out, cheerful and crisp. Boss, the servers are up. And I mean actually up, not Vaughn up. Evan turned with a small smirk. Clara Jensen stood there in a dark blazer, tablet in hand, her hair tied back but with a few rebellious strands escaping the neatness. Good, he said. Last thing we need is another company running on duct tape and ego. She grinned. So today's the big day, huh? The relaunch. Yeah, he said softly. It's time. By noon, the press had gathered in the modest conference room. No lavish chandeliers, no champagne, no red carpets, just truth. Evan stood at the podium in a simple black suit, his posture steady. The room hummed with murmurs as the cameras flashed. Reporters from every tech journal, newspaper, and blog were waiting for his words. Thank you all for being here, he began, his voice calm but sure. A while ago, I was part of a company that forgot what technology was supposed to mean. They built systems that prioritized greed over growth, control over compassion. Today, I'm starting again differently. He clicked the remote, and behind him, the large screen lit up with Nexaware's new logo. A phoenix made of geometric lines, rising upward. This, he continued, is Nexaware Reborn, a company dedicated to innovation, fairness, and accountability. Our goal isn't just to make better systems, it's to make the people behind them better. A reporter raised a hand. Mr. Rivers, how will this company differ from Vaughn Systems? Evan met his gaze. By remembering that technology isn't about power, it's about people. Another question followed. We've heard about your scholarship program. What can you tell us about it? At that, Evan's eyes softened. He nodded to Clara, who brought up another slide. The Thomas Rivers Initiative. It's named after my late father, Evan said quietly. He was a mechanic. He couldn't afford college, but he taught me what real integrity looks like, doing the right thing even when no one's watching. This program will fund young programmers from low-income backgrounds, giving them opportunities my father never had. The room went silent for a moment. Cameras clicked, but softly this time. Evan continued. The scholarship will cover tuition, mentorship, and project sponsorships for students with potential, not just grades. We'll train them here, at Nexaware, and teach them not just code, but conscience. There was a quiet murmur of approval. Someone in the back clapped lightly. Soon others joined. Clara stood beside him, proud, her eyes glistening as she whispered, "You did it, Evan." He smiled faintly. We did it. That evening, when the last reporter left and the office was bathed in the amber hue of sunset, Evan walked through the quiet halls. The hum of servers echoed faintly, a peaceful sound, rhythmic, alive. He passed the wall where framed photos were being hung, images of their small but determined team. At the center of the wall was a large photograph of his father, Thomas Rivers, in his old workshop, grease-stained and smiling. Evan stopped in front of it, hands in his pockets. "Dad," he murmured softly, "I hope you're watching. I finally built something you'd be proud of." The room felt warm, almost like the air itself answered with quiet approval. Behind him, Clara's footsteps approached. "You're talking to him again," she teased gently. Evan smiled without turning. Some conversations don't need replies. Clara leaned against the doorframe. "Well, for what it's worth, I think he'd be proud too, especially about the scholarship. That name carries weight." "I want it to," Evan said. "It should remind every person who comes through these doors that this company stands on something real." She tilted her head. "So what's next for Nexaware?" Evan chuckled lightly. "Next, we start small, build slow, earn trust the hard way." Clara smirked. "That's not exactly a thrilling business plan." "It's the honest one," he replied. Over the next few weeks, Nexaware began to take shape. The old server room turned into a buzzing control center, screens glowing with code and data. The small team of developers worked late nights fueled by pizza, laughter, and the kind of passion that money couldn't buy. Clara ran operations like a steady heartbeat, efficient, calm, and fiercely loyal. Evan spent hours reviewing each line of code himself. Every decision, every contract, every system went through his scrutiny. He wasn't just rebuilding a business, he was rebuilding trust. When the first project launched, a cybersecurity suite designed for nonprofits, it was modest in scale, but monumental in meaning. It sold out its first batch of licenses within a week. Clients sent messages of gratitude. Finally, a company that doesn't treat us like numbers. "Your system saved us thousands. Thank you, Mr. Rivers." Evan read every single message personally. One night, after the team left, Clara found him alone in the conference room, staring out at the skyline. "You know," she said softly, setting 2 mugs of coffee on the table, "you could take a night off. The company's stable." The launch was a success. Evan smiled faintly. "It's strange. Success feels quieter this time." "That's because it's not built on noise," Clara said. "It's built on peace." He looked at her, genuinely grateful. "I couldn't have done this without you." She shrugged. "You could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." They sat there in silence for a while, the city lights flickering below them. Evan glanced up at the glowing Nexaware logo on the glass wall. "Integrity first, always," he read softly. "It's more than a motto, Clara. It's a reminder to never become what we once fought against." She nodded. "Then let's make sure we don't." A week later, the first recipients of the Thomas Rivers Initiative arrived, a group of nervous but bright young students from across the country. Evan greeted them personally in the lobby. "Welcome to Nexaware," he said, extending a hand to the first student, a shy boy with calloused fingers and eager eyes. "Sir," the boy said, voice trembling, "thank you for this chance." Evan smiled. "No, son. Thank yourself. You earned it." As they toured the office, laughter and hope filled the space that once held silence. For For the first time in a long while, Evan felt something that went deeper than victory, peace. He looked around at the growing team, the smiling students, and Clara beside him, clipboard in hand and pride in her eyes. This was what rebuilding truly meant. Not revenge, not dominance. Purpose. Evan Rivers had lost everything once. But now, standing amidst the hum of a company built on integrity and hope, he realized he'd gained something far greater. Not just his business, not just redemption, but himself. And that was enough. Chapter 9, The Voicemail. The evening light poured through the tall glass windows of Evan's office, coating everything in the soft, burnt orange hue of a peaceful sunset. The city below buzzed faintly, a low hum of distant traffic, life moving on. Inside, the office was quiet except for the soft clicking of keys and the rhythmic ticking of a wall clock. Evan sat at his desk, finishing a report for Nexaware's next client launch. A mug of coffee had gone cold beside his laptop, forgotten hours ago. His focus was deep, his mind calm. These days, work didn't feel like an escape, it felt like home. Then his phone buzzed once. A simple vibration against the wooden desk. He almost ignored it, assuming it was another update from Clara or a team notification. But then he glanced at the screen and froze. Alyssa Vaughn. The name glowed like a ghost from past life. For a long, suspended second, he just stared at it. No emotion, no anger, just the quiet realization of how foreign that name felt now. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. A small red notification appeared. One new voicemail. Evan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Months had passed since everything collapsed for her and her father. Months since their 164 unanswered calls. He had thought that silence was permanent. But ghosts have a way of finding cracks in peace. He hesitated for a moment, then picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over the play button. Finally, he pressed it. Her voice came through, fragile, trembling, and broken in a way he'd never heard before. Evan, it's me. She paused. The sound of her uneven breathing filled the small room. I don't even know why I'm calling. You probably hate me. You should. Her words cracked. I can't stop thinking about that day. The list I gave you, God, what was wrong with me? I keep seeing your face. The way you didn't even argue. I thought that silence meant you were weak. But now I see. Her voice wavered again, and Evan could almost picture her, once pristine and perfect, now stripped of pride. You were calm because you didn't need me. Because you already knew what I'd lost. And I didn't even know who you really were. Evan's jaw tightened slightly. He kept his eyes on the skyline outside, gold fading into dusk. After everything happened, after the investigations, after Dad lost everything, I tried to move on. But everywhere I went, people whispered your name. Evan Rivers, the man who built everything. The man I threw away. A faint sob slipped through the speaker. You were never the failure, Evan. I was. I chased a name, not a heart. And I destroyed both. Silence. Then, softly, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve you listening to this. I just needed to say it. You were the real one, Evan. Always. There was one last shaky breath, and then, click, the voicemail ended. The quiet that followed was absolute. Evan sat motionless, the phone still in his hand, the screen dimming to black. Outside, the first stars began to flicker across the evening sky. He didn't move for a long moment. The voice that once commanded his world now sounded like a stranger's echo. Slowly, he stood and walked toward the window. The city stretched below, glowing, alive, unbothered. His reflection looked back at him from the glass. Calm eyes, faint stubble, a man entirely different from the one who had stood in Gregory Vaughn's boardroom months ago. He whispered to no one, "You're right, Alyssa. You finally saw it." Then he returned to his desk. The phone buzzed again, a new message, this time from Clara. "Clara, heading out. Don't stay too late, boss. You need sleep like the rest of us mortals." A small smile tugged at his lips. He typed back, almost done, just wrapping up the day. He set the phone down, stared at the screen once more, and then picked it up again, thumb hovering over the voicemail. There was an option at the bottom. Delete message. For a brief second, he hesitated, not because of sentiment, but because this was closure. Real closure. The kind that doesn't come with fireworks or revenge, but with quiet acceptance. He pressed delete. The message vanished. No anger, no satisfaction, just peace. He leaned back in his chair, breathing out slowly. The kind of exhale that feels like the end of a long chapter. Later that night, he walked out of the office into the cool night air. The streets were mostly empty, city lights reflecting in the puddles left by a light drizzle earlier. As he walked toward his car, he caught his reflection in a shop window, a man in control of his own story. He remembered the version of himself who once begged for respect, who once mistook silence for weakness. That man was gone. At a red light, his phone buzzed again. Another voicemail alert, but this time from an unknown number. For a split second, he wondered if it was her again, but he didn't open it. He didn't need to. He turned the phone off completely and slipped it into his pocket. The night was too peaceful to disturb with echoes of regret. The hum of the city filled the silence around him, a lullaby for those who'd learned to let go. He crossed the street and stopped near a small cafe that had become his favorite since Nexaware's relaunch. Through the window, he could see Clara sitting at a corner table, a stack of files beside her, sipping coffee. She spotted him through the glass and waved with a warm smile. Evan lifted a hand in return, but didn't go inside yet. He just stood there, taking in the sight, the small, ordinary peace he'd built for himself. He thought of Alyssa's voice again, the tremor in her tone, the regret dripping through every syllable. There was a time when that sound would have shattered him. Now it was just noise, distant, powerless, fading into the past. He whispered under his breath, "You don't owe me an apology, Alyssa. You owe yourself one." And with that, he turned, pushed open the cafe door, and stepped into the warm light. Clara looked up. "You okay?" Evan smiled faintly, hanging his coat. "Yeah, just deleting old files." She laughed softly, not knowing how literal that was. "Well, come on then. I saved you a coffee before they closed." "Thanks," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Outside, the city kept moving, unconcerned, unstoppable. Inside, Evan Rivers sat quietly, a man finally free of his ghosts. He didn't need to look back. He didn't need to say a word. His silence said everything. Chapter 10, Legacy of Silence. The city stretched beneath them like a sea of light. Glass towers shimmered in the deep violet dusk, and the hum of life echoed faintly even at this height. The Nexaware rooftop garden had become something of a ritual for Evan and Clara, a place where they came not to work, but to remember how far they'd come. A soft breeze brushed against Evan's face as he leaned against the railing, his suit jacket unbuttoned, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. Behind him, Clara set down 2 cups of coffee on the small metal table. "Still your favorite view?" she asked. "Always," he replied, his eyes following the glowing skyline. "It's the same city, but it doesn't feel the same anymore." Clara walked up beside him, handing him his cup. "That's because you're not the same anymore." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just stopped chasing the wrong kind of approval." Below them, the Nexaware logo glowed faintly against the side of the building, sleek, confident, and unmistakable. Years ago, it had been a dream scribbled in frustration on a notepad in a dim apartment. Now it was a global name, a standard of ethics and innovation in the tech world. Nexaware had grown into a powerhouse. Governments, corporations, and nonprofits relied on their systems. Young programmers trained under their scholarships. And yet, there were no flashy ads or self-congratulatory speeches, just quiet excellence. And Evan preferred it that way. Later that night, they moved inside to the top floor office where it had all begun. The space was minimalist now, clean white walls, warm wood floors, and a single large digital screen on the wall displaying real-time cybersecurity metrics from around the world. Clara sat on the couch, kicking off her heels. "You know," she said, "it still amazes me how you never talk about it." "About what?" Evan asked, glancing up from his laptop. "Everything you went through. Alyssa, her father, the firing, the humiliation." He paused, fingers hovering above the keyboard. Then he closed the laptop softly. "There's nothing left to say about them, Clara. Their story ended when mine began." Clara tilted her head, studying him. "You really let it all go, didn't you?" I had to, he said simply. If I'd held on to that anger, I'd still be standing in their shadows. Silence was my way of moving forward. She smiled faintly. Well worked. You've built something they can't even dream of now. He looked around the office, the soft hum of servers below, the quiet glow of the Nexaware logo reflected on the glass. It's not about being better than them anymore, he said. It's about being better than the man I used to be. A soft knock came at the door. A young intern peeked in nervously. Mr. Rivers? The guests for the award ceremony are here. They're waiting downstairs. Right? Evans said, standing and adjusting his tie. We'll be down shortly. When the door closed again, Clara smirked. Still not used to the Mr. Rivers thing, huh? Not even a little, he said with a laugh. The awards ceremony was modest, as Evan had requested. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about recognition for the people who'd built Nexaware with him. The ballroom was filled with employees, partners, and scholarship students from the Thomas Rivers Initiative. When Evan stepped on stage, the applause was warm, not thunderous, not dramatic, but heartfelt. He waited for the noise to settle, then began speaking with the same quiet confidence that had carried him through the years. I've been asked a few times what drives Nexaware's success, he said, scanning the crowd. And my answer is always the same. It's not the technology. It's the people, the integrity, the decision to do the right thing, even when no one's watching. He paused, letting the words sink in. This company was born out of silence, out of walking away instead of fighting back. And in that silence, I learned that peace is louder than revenge ever could be. The audience watched him closely, some nodding, some visibly moved. This, he continued, isn't my legacy. It's ours. Every coder, every analyst, every intern who chose integrity over ego, you're the reason Nexaware stands today. When he stepped off the stage, Clara was waiting near the side curtain, clapping softly. You still know how to make an entire room listen without raising your voice, she said. Evan smiled. That's the trick. Speak only when it matters. Later that night, when the celebration ended, Evan and Clara took the elevator back up to the rooftop. The city had fallen quiet. A few stars peeked through the clouds, faint but visible. Evan stood at the edge again, coffee cup in hand. The lights below seemed endless, stretching far into the dark horizon. You ever think about what people say about you now? Clara asked. You've kind of become this legend in the tech world, the man who turned humiliation into legacy. He chuckled softly. I hear the whispers sometimes, but that's all they are, whispers. Clara folded her arms, looking at him curiously. And that doesn't bother you? Not at all, he said. Whispers mean they're still trying to figure out how I did it. That's enough. She smiled. You're impossible, you know that? He turned to her with a grin. So I've been told. For a long while, they stood there in silence, watching the city pulse and breathe. The wind carried faint sounds of life. A car horn, distant laughter, the hum of late-night trains. It was the kind of peace that had been earned, not given. Evan finally broke the silence, his voice thoughtful. Sometimes, he said, the best revenge isn't loud. It's living so while they have to whisper your name. Clara looked at him, her expression softening. That line's going to end up quoted all over the internet tomorrow. He laughed quietly. Then maybe it'll remind someone out there not to waste their fire on hate. They lingered for a while longer before heading inside. Evan walked through the darkened halls of Nexaware, running his hand lightly over the wall where the company's motto was etched in brushed steel. Integrity first always. He stopped in front of it, reflecting on how far he'd come, from a man standing humiliated in a boardroom to one leading a global company built on ethics and truth. He whispered to himself, You did it, Dad. In his office, he opened his laptop one last time that night. The screen glowed softly, showing a dashboard filled with graphs, systems, and the smiling faces of his scholarship students from around the world. He scrolled through the photos for a while, pride warming his chest. Finally, he closed the laptop. The click echoed softly through the room. He stood, looking out at the city one more time. His reflection in the glass was calm, steady, a man at peace with his past, present, and future. He smiled faintly, turned off the lights, and walked toward the elevator. The doors closed behind him, the faint hum of machinery following him down. Outside, the Nexaware sign glowed in the night like a promise to the world. Legacy doesn't need noise. It just needs truth. And Evan Rivers, once the man they fired, once the man they mocked, had built his with silence.